All right, ladies and gentlemen. Psalms 13 says, O my people, that they would have hearkened unto me in Israel, had walked in my ways. I should have subdued their enemies and turned my hand against their adversaries. The haters of the Lord would have submitted themselves unto him, and your time would have endured forever. He would have fed you also with the finest of wheat and with honey out of the rock. He would have satisfied you. There's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path, as Morpheus would say to Neo. It's harder to walk, but it's worth it to walk in a way that is good. It's always a benefit in the end to do good. So let's aspire to do that, shall we? DC. Someone on Facebook, Justice League Unite, said and noted that Jason Momoa had streaks of blonde in his hair, and I didn't think about it much at the time. But when he's Aquaman, I didn't notice, because Aquaman is blonde, generally speaking, in the comics, that he had streaks of blonde in his hair. I don't know if it's natural or if it's something that they did to make him kind of look that way, but if it's natural, it makes sense. Jason Momoa is a product of two different races of people, a Hawaiian man and an American Caucasian woman. So it's not strange that these things could happen to him. And if you look at his children, they're here, they're also a product of two biracial people, making them multiracial. And that's very interesting because Arthur Curry, the character that Jason Momoa plays, is also a biracial, well, he's not biracial, he's a bispecies person. He's half human, half Atlantean. So that Jason is probably the perfect person to play this character and see this character evolve with time, which is why I'm looking forward to Aquaman, the movie that comes later on this year. I think it's somewhere in December. Now, another question was posed to me in Justice League Unite, so I'm going to address it right now. And that question was, how is it that Ares, the god of war, who had a jealousy and hatred for mankind that we saw in Wonder Woman and created strife among mankind, how could he be someone who was fighting alongside mankind in the Great War against Steppenwolf? To me, that's a good question. Here's the answer. Though Zeus created mankind and Ares was jealous of mankind and therefore created strife among them, it must be mentioned that as mankind fought among themselves, there were wars. And as a result of these wars, we got different tribes of man. And these tribes of men really were nullified of their fighting for a season because the gods created the Amazons to show them love. And by showing them love, mankind stopped fighting for a season. In fact, the Amazons and mankind fought alongside each other. And this visual depiction that you see, the artwork for Wonder Woman, this is actually what was not seen in the movie, this artwork, but it was shown that the history is that the Amazons fought alongside mankind in some what we know as the Great War. So where you see Antiope here and Philippus and some other Amazons, and you can see they're carrying weapons. And this would be alluded to the Great War. So the follow-up on this was what we saw in the Great War here, where mankind fought alongside the Amazons. Here are the Amazons right here, Antiope right here, Hippolyta, what looks like Menelope, Penthesilea, and so on. All right? And then we have the tribes of man here. So you see the king of man. They assume it's King Arthur and some of his people. And then you see here a black person. He's another tribe. And then you see another person here who looks like he's maybe from the Middle East. Different tribes of men. Okay? But also in addition to that, we also had the gods who were helping them, as well as the Atlanteans. So when there was peace among the earth, at least amongst mankind, it was because of the Amazons who made that possible. Of course, we also know the Amazons had a history with the Atlanteans where they also warred them at a certain period in time. I'm not too sure when that was. but it had to be when they were amongst the tribes of men. So, coming back to what we were saying, the Amazons, they worked alongside mankind and helped them fight some great wars. This was kind of left out of the movie, but it was also scheduled to be in the movie, Wonder Woman. So, what happened? Mankind betrayed the Amazons and enslaved them so that they were in bondage. Here you see Artemis, which is a soldier, not Artemis the god, and there is Hippolyta right there. And mankind has enslaved the Amazons. All of this Hippolyta and Antiope told Diana. And it so happened that the Amazons broke free of their bonds and fought back, led by Hippolyta. You see Hippolyta right here. There's Antiope over here. And they fought back against mankind for their freedom. And mankind went on to pursue them. And when they were pursuing them, the gods came to the Amazons' defense. And Ares, therefore, realizing this, he attacked the gods for defending the Amazons. And he killed them one by one until Zeus was left. And on that point, he was about to kill Zeus, and Zeus dealt him a pretty serious blow that caused him to retreat and run away. And as a result of that, Zeus created an island for when Ares would reemerge and try to finish the job he started of having mankind kill himself off. And so he wanted to make sure that the Amazons had a safe place, and he also gave them a weapon strong enough to kill a god if Ares came after them. So that's basically the story. Now, and when we saw in Wonder Woman, we saw that Ares was going after mankind to try and get them to kill, and Diana finished off Ares. Now, what you realize is two things you need to note before I finish this and go on to another topic. The first thing is that Ares loves war. He's the god of war. So, therefore, anytime there's a war around, Ares will be the first to join it. Okay? So this is why Ares was there, first of all, in this great war with mankind. And the other point is Ares stirred up war amongst mankind many a time. So that even after that, mankind betrays the Amazons. When they're betraying the Amazons, I'm sure Ares had something to do behind the scenes with that. Now, if you know the DC lore, you know Ares had Hercules attack the Amazons, and through treachery, Hercules was able to steal the golden girdle and get them in slavery, and then Hippolyta appealed to one of the gods, and the gods came to her defense, and therefore they were able to break free from the slavery, get back the golden girdle, and therefore triumph over mankind. Okay? I don't know if the story for the DCU is about the same, but at least we were able to fill in some gaps here with what happened with mankind when the Amazons came on the scene, and the tribes of man came together and fought against a common evil, which would have been Steppenwolf. Now, Steppenwolf is very much aware that the old gods are killed off, which means Steppenwolf had to have been following also what's happening with mankind and how mankind is fighting amongst themselves and how they betrayed the Amazons, etc., 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 etc. So, you now know the answer to why Ares ends up fighting alongside mankind. It's not necessarily because he loves mankind, because he doesn't. But it's because it's a war, all hands on deck. He's in the middle of a war. And on top of that, he was still sowing seeds of discord about mankind, because mankind comes up to betray the Amazons a little bit later down the road. And we know Ares was behind that. So there you go. Now let's move on to another topic. It's a pretty hot topic today in the world, particularly in the United States of America. And I want to just deal with it as much as I can. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is gun control. And let's give a history of guns in the United States of America. The reason that citizens have the right to bear arms is primarily because of the American Revolution. Towns and cities towns in the early Americas in the 1779, 1760s, they had citizens there. And at the beginning of the American Revolution, the citizens by Paul Revere were warned in the different tongues, and key people as well, that the British were coming to take certain of their leaders. There was militia there in the different places, but the citizens also played a role in the resistance, and they had arms. So that's why in 1791 we had an amendment to the Constitution where citizens have the right to bear arms. Now, since that time, remember it was an amendment, since that time, it's always been that way that citizens bear arms in the United States of America. However, there have been regulations and laws which have been put in place that while there's an amendment to the Constitution, there are laws which ban certain weapons and certain firearms in the United States of America civil use. And you have to have a special permit to be able to use these things. So therefore, whereas back in 1791 this amendment was made and people could use just about almost anything, now there are certain regulations and restrictions to what you can use. And it makes sense because weaponry became much more devastating over time, as well as the weaponry in the wrong hands of civilians could cause massive amounts of damage and death in a very short space of time. So that is why there were these new laws restricting certain things. So you cannot go around the United States of America with a machine gun saying that you're going to hunt game. It's not happening. It's been banned for a long time. You can't just move around in a Humvee with a cannon on top of it firing away at will. You can do it, and you can't just go anywhere in the United States with that. Now, you can't even carry firearms and just use them anywhere in the United States either. There are specific places where you can use firearms, and there are certain regulations under which you can use those firearms. There are shooting range, there are game ranges, there are certain times of the year when you can hunt certain game, and it is illegal for you to use firearms in certain game at certain times of the year. So there's a lot of regulations that regulate, and these are federal regulations that regulate things as to what you can shoot, when you can shoot, if you can shoot, what you can use to shoot, etc. in the United States of America. So you can't just come up and say, oh, the Second Amendment allows me to carry firearms. No, it allows you to carry a firearm, sure, but there are certain criteria that must be satisfied before you can do so. Now let's get into some of the things that make us very worrisome and why we need some more gun regulation, more gun control on a federal level. And again, these regulations and laws are in keeping with the Second Amendment's intention. This is why we don't have, people don't walk around with machine guns as civilians in the United States of America. All right? You can't use a machine gun in the United States of America. In fact, it's banned from being made. That's how bad it is. Okay? It's prohibited from being made. Now let's talk a little bit about it. So, to put some things in context, the countries with the most mass shootings from 1966 to 2012, the countries with the most mass shootings are as follows: United States, Philippines, Russia, Yemen, and France. And the United States leads the way by a phenomenal gap between the next country. And we're not talking about first world nations. The Philippines is not a first world nation. So the question is, why is that so? It is not because the United States has a constitution that says you have the right to bear arms, because almost anywhere in the world you can bear arms. In any democratic society, you can bear a licensed firearm. So there's nothing, you have the right to do it. All right, so that's not the reason. So what is the reason that the United States of America has so many mass shootings? Not only that, but what is so perturbing at this point in time is that between 1949 to the present time, and let me just zoom this in so you can see it a little bit better. All right, it's actually less clear, but that's okay. The deadliest mass shootings in modern U.S. history from 1949 to the present time. 1949 to the present time. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's almost 80 years. So the deadliest mass shootings in the last 80 years. 3 of the 5 most deadliest mass shootings. In fact, the deadliest mass shootings in the last 80 years have happened in the last 11 years. And the deadliest mass shootings, the 3 of the 5 most deadliest mass shootings happened in the space of 2 years. That means the regularity and the severity of mass shootings is increasing. That's a serious message to people that we need to do something and change something. And it's not just family values. Okay? That's not going to stop it. It's like telling people you need to be more moral, you need to be more Christian. Come on now. That ain't going to happen overnight. So there is a serious problem when it comes to these things. Not only that, but I want to show you something else. So we'll go to the CDC at this present point in time. Let's go to the Center for Disease Control, okay? Let me move across to there. Okay, so the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. And we're going to look at firearm mortality since by state in 2005 and 2014, 15, and 16. Okay? So in the United States, the average the average index for the death rate in the United States is about 10.3. That's the average mortality rate, okay? 10.3. Now let's look at the different states here. Let's go to Florida. And Florida, it hits the average, which is 10.00. That means you have basically 1,064 deaths by firearm in 2005. All right? I want you to just pay attention to Hawaii. Hawaii has a firearm death rate of 2.1, which is significantly lower than the average death rate. And their deaths are 28 deaths by firearm in 2005. Let's move to 2014. And when we look at the United States, the average death rate is 10.3. When we look at Florida, it has increased to 11.5. And now there are 2,410 deaths by guns. Hawaii, 2.6. And 40 deaths. So both Hawaii and Florida, the death rate has increased. In 2015, Florida, the death rate by guns is 12.0. The deaths are 2,555. In Hawaii, the death rate is 3.6. And the deaths by guns, 55. Also, the death rate is increasing by guns and gun use. In 2016, the death rate in Florida is 12.6. The deaths, 2,704. In Hawaii, the death rate is 4.5 and 66 people. In other words, death by guns is increasing year by year. Now here's the question. The question is, what is happening that we are having an increased death rate year by year by guns? Right? All right, let's continue. And that's disturbing. Let's go to yet another bit and piece of information here. Again, here are firearm death rates in the United States by state. And we have the death rates here. Very high in Alabama. Alaska has a very, very high death rate. Okay. Arkansas, Colorado. Florida has a death rate, and this is in state firearm death rates 2013 per 1,000 population. This was in 2013. Okay. And the death rates were very, very high, I find. Florida was 12.45. Hawaii was 2.71, so it was pretty low again, Hawaii. Massachusetts was pretty low as well. And here is the firearm death rate by state. The extreme blue shows the high states which have very high death rates. Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee, Oklahoma. NM stands for what again? I can't remember what NM stands for. Let's see. New Mexico. Okay. New Mexico. With what? WY. Wyoming, I believe. Is it Wyoming or Wisconsin? I don't know. At MT, which is Montana. All right. Yeah, I think it's Wyoming. These are where the highest death rates with firearms is happening. All of these are gun country, all right? And very few of them are regulated. Now let's keep moving here for a minute here. We see the murders by guns, and we see population density. Now I want to show you something because I have a point why I'm talking about Florida and so on. Murders by guns. In Florida, you see the population density and so on. In Florida, we had 987 deaths by murder by guns. I'm sorry, we had 987 murders, 669 gun murders. Okay? A gun was involved in the murder. In Hawaii, we had 24 murders and 7 of them by guns. Florida has a population of 19 million, a little bit over 19 million. Hawaii, 1 million. Okay? So when we look at gun ownership in those countries, Hawaii actually has a higher percentage of gun owners, 45.1. Florida has 32.5. However, gun murders in Hawaii are 0.5%, where 0.5, whereas that's 0.5 murders per 100,000, and gun murders, and then murders without guns, or murders including guns and without guns, is 1.8. Okay, in Florida, murders with and without guns are 5 out of 100,000, and 3.4 murders with guns. So usually a gun is involved in a murder in Florida, not necessarily in Hawaii. Yet we have more licensed gun owners, percentage of licensed gun owners in Hawaii than in Florida. So how is it that Hawaii has much lower murder level when it comes to guns than Florida does, yet they have more gun owners in Hawaii? Why is that the case? And I wanted to use Hawaii as a case because I want to show you a couple of things. Hawaii has never had a case in the last couple of years of any mass murders by guns. However, when you look at Florida, we have 2 cases now of mass murder in Florida. One was in the school and the other one was in a club. And those 2 mass shootings in Florida happened in the state with guns. It happened with guns. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what's going on in Hawaii and what's going on in Florida with in terms of gun laws? So let's look at it. So let's look at Florida, and then let's look at Miami in terms of gun laws, shall we? So, in Florida, here are some of the laws. In terms of state license to purchase a firearm, you don't need to have a state license to purchase a firearm, neither the long gun or the handgun, no matter what kind of handgun it is. You do not have to register for a firearm, okay? You don't need to have an owner's license for a firearm. You don't need to have Florida doesn't have an assault weapon law. There is no restriction on the magazine capacity for your firearm. So you can have any size magazine you want. You are allowed to concealed carry license required. For a long gun, it's not applicable, but for a handgun, you must have a license to carry a concealed weapon. So that's one thing they have. They actually have a gun law that says no, you can't. If you're concealing your weapon, you must have a license for it. What's the procedure to get that license? Is a good question. In Florida, you cannot open carry your weapon. State preemption of local restrictions. It has that. Okay? So there's a preemption for local restrictions, both for the long guns and the normal. NFA weapons restricted. Nope. You're allowed to carry NFA weapons. Peaceful journey laws. There are no peaceful journey laws because there's no need. Duty to inform someone that you have a weapon. No. You don't have to inform anyone that you have a weapon. Background checks required for private sales of weapons. You don't have to have any background checks for private sales. And the red flag law, it is in effect. So police can go ahead and confiscate or go into your place if there is reasonable evidence to support that you may be a danger to society or others. All right, they can go in with the red flag law. That's Florida. Hawaii, you must have a state permit to purchase a firearm. Now, here's the interesting thing about Hawaii. There are more firearm holders in Hawaii, percentage-wise, than there are in Florida. So, even though this law is in effect where you have to have a license to purchase a weapon, people obeying the law have done it, and they have their weapons. So it doesn't stop you from not getting a weapon, but it also means there's a procedure you must go through to get a permit, which means they are able to sift through people. At least there's a procedure so that you are responsible with your weapon, that you are educated on your weapon and what weapons are, and therefore it's not just any and everybody who gets a weapon, even though more people actually go through the procedure. You must also register your firearm. That's absolutely important. And that, again, allows for responsibility. If somebody's registering a firearm, it means you can always look to see if there are bump stocks on that firearm, if that person's storing up bump stocks, or something weird is going on. Because there are other processes to weed out the people. It doesn't stop you from purchasing whatever firearms on the market, but it's sort of a check and balance in place to ensure that the people who are getting these firearms, they are in good mindset, they are responsible people. And so, just to add in there, it says you must be registered with the county police chief within 5 days of purchase or arrival to Hawaii, which is awesome because the police are involved in regulating this, ensuring that citizens are responsible in having their firearms, so that the police are the people who can detect. They're the first line of defense to detect if someone could be a potential danger. It says registration is not required for black powder and pre-1899 firearms. Okay. Assault weapon law. There is none for long guns, but there are for handguns. Law bans assault pistols with 2 or more banned features. Does not apply to rifles or shotguns with a barrel length greater than 16 inches. Again, sensible stuff. Magazine capacity restriction. For long guns, there is no magazine capacity restriction because there's no need for it. But for handguns, absolutely. Again, sensible laws put in place to prevent people from carrying easy weaponry and being able to utilize them to kill a lot of people, right? And if you don't want magazine restriction, what do? You go to the rifle authorities, let them vet you or screen you so you can have that extra license in place to use, unlimited magazines because you're doing a particular task. So it's reasonable. Any magazine with a capacity of more than 10 rounds can be inserted into a pistol, and that is prohibited. Hang on a second. My screen just checked. Members of organizations are exempt from pistol magazine limit at places of target shooting. So, like I said before, venue determines the difference. So you can have unlimited amount of magazine stuff because you're in a target shooting ground, or you're going for a specific hunting trip or a specific task. So like I said before, you can present the information so that, okay, fine, you will need unlimited magazines, fine. All right, this is a civil society, and in a civil society, you must have regulations and rules. What did I say? Even though there's a Second Amendment, you can't just go shooting your gun anywhere, any place, anytime, because you feel like it. Oh, I feel like shooting my pistol at that bullseye thing. No, you can't just do that. There are laws in place to make sure you don't do that, right? So why is it that when we say the word gun law, all of a sudden people lose their minds and they're like, oh no, the government could come for us and deprive us of what? Come on, man. Enough of that. Hawaii has it. Owner license required. No, you don't have to have an owner license for long guns, nor do you have to have an owner license for handguns, but you must have a permit to use them. And it's very important to have a permit. The permit shows that you know how to be responsible with your weapon. It shows that you are someone who is in the right mind and in the right standing with your weapon. And I'm assuming this permit must be renewed over a different period of time, just like your driver's license needs to be renewed over a certain period of time. So you don't just go knocking down people, because if you went and you fired your weapon and it were involved in a manslaughter case or whatever other case, for whatever reason, then it should be harder to get a permit. Okay? Whatever transpired, it should be harder. It's just like with insurance. If you crash your car, your insurance premiums go up, right? Okay? Because you have a history. You could say it's not my fault, and it doesn't matter. You shouldn't have gotten yourself in an accident. Carry permits required. For your handguns, absolutely. You must have a carry permit. It says, may issue by statute, but no issue in practice. The chief of police may grant a permit in exceptional cases where an applicant shows reason to fear injury to the applicant's person or property. So again, it's flexible law. You should have to carry a permit, but there are exceptions to the rule. Again, reasonable laws. These are reasonable laws. Don't want to take your firearm from you. Of course not. But you have to tighten up laws to ensure that people who shouldn't get these guns and shouldn't be responsible and don't know how to care for a gun and don't know how to keep their guns in a safe place away from their kids, so that kids don't pick up the weapons and shoot each other and kill each other. These things go for that reason. Hawaii wasn't always like that with gun laws. Open carry. Yes, you can openly carry your weapon in public. So whereas Florida, you can't open carry a gun in public, here in Hawaii you can. And why? Because it's responsible people carrying these weapons. If you have a licensed firearm and you are a licensed firearm owner, you should have no problem in the world, because you know you're properly vetted. You know that you have your permits up to date, just like how you have driver's license up to date. Okay, you have your permit up to date. It just makes common sense. Okay? But yet Florida doesn't have an open carry law because they don't have things in place. State preemption of local restrictions, absolutely. Municipalities may enact and enforce local regulations only if they are identical to and provide the same penalty as state law. NFA weapons restricted, absolutely. Machine guns, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, silencers, suppressors are prohibited from the average citizen. Certain destructive devices and AOWs are allowed with proper tax stamp and NFA paperwork from the ATF. Peaceful journey laws not needed. Federal laws observed. And background checks required for private sales? Absolutely. A person who wants to purchase a handgun or long gun must obtain a permit to acquire the ownership of a firearm, which requires a background check of the applicant. Again, it just makes sense. It's thorough. And the NRA don't lose a dime. In fact, the NRA looks great in Hawaii. They look fantastic because Hawaii governments put things in place so that people would not unnecessarily die due to using these weapons. So I wanted to show this, to show people federal laws they're not supposed to be as specific as these laws in Hawaii. Absolutely not. But federal laws are put in place so that it can give a framework for the states to do whatever the heck they want. And the other thing I want to say about federal law, because I think people don't understand governance. Just because a federal law is put in place doesn't mean that the states cannot work their way around federal laws and allow certain laws to be in place instead of the federal law. We saw that with insurance, right? The states had the choice to go with federal law or not. So my point being that it's really hypocritical when people get up and say, "Oh, that the federal government mustn't do anything to control gun laws." No, 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 they need to, because the pressing issue is not only are deaths and murders by guns going up in the United States of America, but also mass shootings are becoming more regular, and it's because we have these rapid fire weapons which can be used as acts of terror. They can, and you have to have a contingency plan. You have to look at the pros and cons of having people have easier access to weapons. Now, we know the average person is not going to take those weapons and kill someone with them. But we have to cater for people in the cracks, because when they do, they make news, and they're making news more and more. I don't think America has as big a problem with global terrorism as much as they do local born terrorism. And the mental capacity of certain individuals in society, they give you all the signs. The guy who killed all those people in the school, he gave all the signs. What's he doing procuring a weapon? He should never have that opportunity. And the only way that is going to be rectified is legally. We cannot wait to try and heal and cure these people and tell them about Jesus and all that shit. We don't have time for that. We have to act. Preventative measures are better than cure. So there must be put on the table some kind of gun control legislature, as there has been in the past. It is not up to the individual states, because Florida has been doing a rotten job when it comes to gun control of mass shootings. They have had 2 in the space of a year. Very violent ones. They're on the top 5 list. So you can't count on just Florida. You have to have some legislature there, federal legislation, to make sure to cushion these states. And if the states don't want to use the federal legislation, they can work their way around it. But in the meantime, put something as a fabric in place. The states cannot sometimes, they do not know how to deal with a problem on a state level when it's getting out of hand. And it's getting out of hand, in states who are not putting the proper framework in place to deal with these issues. Hawaii is doing a pretty good job so far. Right? And there are other states which do a fantastic job. There's another state, it begins with M. Let me see if I can find it. And it does a phenomenal job with this. It's M. Hold on a second, I'll find it. Massachusetts. Massachusetts' gun laws are sensible gun laws, once again, that work. Massachusetts has a very low gun violence and death rate. Okay? Again, they start off with a permit to purchase a firearm. Common sense. You get a permit to drive a car. You have to have a certain degree of vetting before you go on a plane. Okay? That's travel. That's just travel. So why is it there's no vetting procedure to purchase a firearm, a weapon, a destructive weapon? Why? You do not have to register your firearm in Massachusetts. However, your owner license is required. So whereas you don't register your firearm so they can track your firearm and make sure that you have your firearm, and if you lose your firearm, they're able to follow up on that. They have the other contingency, which is you have to have a license. You must have a carry permit for a handgun. So there are 2 things you need: a permit to purchase and a carry permit. You also need to have an owner's license. So there's 3 things. That makes you more responsible. Just like how a police officer must account for every bullet in his gun, you too must account for every bullet in your gun. Why is it the citizen is off the hook and he can just do any old thing he wants? The police can't do any old thing they want. So why is it that citizens should be doing anything they want? Open carry permitted. It's handguns, open carry is permitted. However, long guns, no. You have to conceal your long gun to carry. State preemption of local restrictions. There are no local restrictions. There is a limited preemption for some laws. Assault weapon law, they have it for both long guns and handguns, unlike Hawaii. Alright? Magazine capacity restriction for both weapons. Alright? Again, the one thing about these laws is they are flexible, depending on the situation, depending on the circumstance. Of course you can carry unlimited magazines. If you're going to a shooting range, of course. If you're going to hunt game, of course, up in the mountains. So it depends on the situation and venue. Let's go on. NFA weapons restricted, absolutely. Suppressors are restricted only for law enforcement or licensed manufacturers. Some destructive devices are banned at the state level, while others are banned at local level. DDs can be completely illegal or legal depending on what town you live in. SBRs, SBSs, and AOWs are allowed with proper approval from the ATF. A machine gun license is required to possess a machine gun. So, again, while there are restrictions, it's not completely, you can't use these things. You can use them depending on, okay? Background checks are required for private sales, absolutely. Again, Massachusetts, sensible laws. And all we say is, no, we don't want the NRA not to make money. We want weapons made in the United States of America. That's one of the, the big things about America, all right? In Israel, people are allowed to carry weapons, and they're trained in combat. So, of course, but responsibility, accountability, proper vetting, and of course, follow-up. Because people can change over time. It's important you are a stable person carrying a weapon. You must be stable. Military people will tell you how they deal with their weapons. They don't behave with their weapons willy-nilly. So if military people are responsible with their weapons, then we should expect the civilians to do the same. Okay? So I just wanted to share that with you guys because I thought this was an issue worth talking about, which is gun control and gun laws in the United States. The states have done certain things. Of course, federal law cannot be so specific. It's up to the states to be more specific about the gun laws. But at least it must put a fabric in place. And it must be something sensible and substantial to adjust to the changing trends in firearms. Firearms can do things now that back in 1791 they couldn't do. All right? The intent of firearms was not for civilians to have to kill each other. That was not the purpose of firearms. The right to bear arms was so that civilians, in case of an uprising, in case of something happening by some other power, the civilians could defend themselves. That's why the Second Amendment was there, because that's how the American Revolution came. So, while civilians should have access to different weaponry under different conditions, some of them having military background, etc., you will want to have your special firearms for that. There's nothing wrong with that. But all you'll need to do is get a permit and go to the right venue to do that. So you can train yourself for whatever situation. If you think it's going to be an invasion, whatever, you can still have that weaponry and you can still know how to use it. But at designated places and with permission by having permits. But by and large, citizens shouldn't be walking around with machine guns. They shouldn't be walking around or driving around in a tank. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make no sense. Not in this age. That's like saying, oh, civilians should have access to atomic bombs. It doesn't make sense. Now, if you want to go somewhere and learn how to utilize or the process behind making an atomic bomb, plutonium and stuff, you can go ahead and do that. It's a military thing. The information should be available to you. You should not be able to access the things to do so, but you should at least know. But at the end of the day, you're not supposed to have to be able to do that, because if you could, then suppose you're a crazy wacko and you decide to use atomic weapons on your own people. That's the common sense behind it, okay? So, sensible gun laws, absolutely. The CDC has all the information there. Plus, we have a number of other governing bodies who have done research. Plus, you have research from universities, etc., on guns. And when you look at the picture of it, it is important today to realize the seriousness of what is happening in the United States of America and why there needs to be a federal blanket to protect states who do not know how to regulate their gun laws. And their gun laws, especially in recent times, are failing them. And yes, mass shootings are a small percentage of the gun deaths in the United States of America. People say suicides are the highest. It does not matter. What we've found is the states in which they have sensible gun laws, suicide rates by guns is lower than the other states. Okay? And why is that? Because you have to be a responsible, sensible, in their right mind person to have a gun. Which means you must not allow your gun to get into the hands of someone who is unstable. You must treat your gun as if it is a weapon of mass destruction, and you must take all precautions in how to deal with it. And by giving someone a license means that they had to know how to care for your gun, what to do, where to put your gun. It mustn't just be somebody who walks off the street and just buys a firearm. No vetting needed. That's ridiculous. And it's wrong. Guns are not toys. Suppose a guy buys a firearm, loads it, goes back into the place where they're selling firearms, and shoots someone. It can happen. Because the guy's not in his right mind. I'm surprised there are not more gun deaths by crazy people out here. But anyway, I just wanted to leave this here and my contribution to gun laws and why I believe that the federal government is really dragging their feet on gun laws. Either they're clueless as to what to do next, or it is that they are afraid that the powerful lobbyists in the NRA, which their job is to sell as many guns as possible, so I can't be mad at them, but that powerful lobbyist is somewhere deep down in their pockets giving them money, and they're afraid to make a move. But they should, unprovoked, they should just make a move on gun laws. And it needs to be something federal. And back in the 1990s, Bill Clinton passed a bill regulating gun laws, and it had a duration of 10 years, and it expired in 2004. And it did affect mass shootings, though not extremely significantly, but it did affect it in bringing them down. Now, here's the thing. A similar way, if I were to suggest to Congress and the Senate, you can put on the card something that's temporary, a gun law, and just any gun law. Just make sure that the gun law is something, like you guys are talking about bump stocks. Get something done with bump stocks. Do something that has to do with gun laws. NRA doesn't have to agree with you. They're just someone who sells guns. It's not, whatever you do, listen to me. People who want to get guns, they're going to do whatever they need to get the guns. Okay? That's just what it is. And so if it means you have to register to get a gun, or you have to have a license to get a gun, they'll do it. But here's the thing. The key to getting the gun is this. You want people to go through the process of understanding what they're undertaking, taking it seriously. The average person's not going to be violent with a gun and is going to obey the laws, the average person. But you still need to put these precautions in place that the average person might know. So if I suggest to Congress and the Senate, so that they actually move the needle and actually get some kind of progress, regardless of whether the NRA agrees with you or not, in the long run, it will help the NRA's image. If the NRA doesn't have to hear about an AR-15 killing someone again, and how we need to ban AR-15s, trust me, it will help their image. So what the NRA needs to do is to work along, if they want to, they should work along with Congress and the Senate to pass something. Get something passed on gun laws on a federal level. The Second Amendment is an amendment. And just like how it's an amendment, there can be amendments to the Second Amendment. States do it all the time. So, it's time to do it on a federal level. And these children out there, they're learning and educating themselves so that other children in schools, look, you're not supposed to have gun violence like that in schools like that. There, of course, we know there are gun violence in schools on a daily basis in certain schools in the United States of America. And we don't talk about that. And they're usually underrepresented people we're talking about, black communities. And that also needs to be a subject of discussion. But what I am saying is that the gun laws in the United States of America, and gun laws all around the world, for that matter, must take into consideration the responsibility of the gun handler. People say guns don't kill people. People kill people. That is true. But people kill people with guns that have the potential to do mass destruction because they can get access to the guns that have mass destruction. That's the problem. The people who should not be having these guns for bad intentions, that is what we are have a problem with. And the way to nip that in the bud early is to deny them that access, which means you must instill some sort of licensing for guns, which will keep the licensed firearms out of the hands of people who are not mentally, physically, or spiritually or responsible enough to have them. Okay? Because the mental state of people, that's one thing. The other thing is looking at the history, the background checks of these people. They'll tell us their personality profiles, etc. And if they have incidents of having outrage and they're constantly blowing up all the time, and they have problems and they have incidents in their community which have been reported like misdemeanors, etc., you don't want those crazy people having guns. You will notice that Alaska has a very high gun murder rate. And the reason they have a very high gun murder rate is because there's a lot of crazy people up in Alaska who have access to guns. And the laws in Alaska do not prevent these people from getting those guns. It's really simple. A lot of deaths by guns can be prevented if you do proper vetting procedures and you have people go through some kind of class before they get a license or whatever to procure a weapon. Licensed firearm carriers get their license. They're supposed to get their license by, just like how you get a license for a car, you're supposed to do some sort of test to evaluate and to find out that you can know what is involved in having a firearm. You need to at least have that, some kind of training. You're not supposed to be just pick up a firearm just like that and have fun with it. So that's all I have to say about guns and gun laws. And the federal government needs to get that done. If they don't get it done, then each individual in the United States of America, and you know what's the interesting thing? When it comes to bump stocks, when it comes to laws to regulate guns, the majority of Americans, 77% of Americans, feel there's something must be done with respect to the gun laws. They don't know what it is, but something must be done. So the majority of Americans agree. Every time the disaster happens, something needs to be done about our gun laws. And most people feel it's banning certain guns or getting certain guns off the table because the AR-15 has been used a lot in these tremendous acts of terror and mass shootings of late. It's the preferred gun of choice, but it is a ubiquitous gun anyway in America. So, but I would say this. I'm not saying you need to ban the AR-15. I am saying that responsible people getting the AR-15 is what it needs to be happening. But if people decide to ban the AR-15, fine. But it is a very beloved gun, and it's a very ubiquitous gun. Okay, it's used for many different things. So, if they want to ban the AR-15, guess what? These people will go and find some other gun to use. So it's more important that gun laws, it's not necessarily ban certain guns, but you must put regulations in place. And there needs to be less guns running around in America. What do I mean by this? The more guns you have, the more likelihood of someone getting hurt by a gun or dying by a gun. That's just the way it goes. No matter how responsible you are, there's only so many guns you can handle at one given time. So, therefore, gun control doesn't limit how many guns you have. No, that's stupid. That'd be dumb. But it must track, at least to some degree, the gun owners. That makes sense? Not the guns. You said it. People kill people. So it's the gun owners. And how does that happen? It's very simple. Just like how they track people who have driver's license. You have to renew your license to have a gun ever so often. And depending on how your track record is, you won't have to renew your license as often as other people. It's that simple. So you can't go in and just purchase a firearm just like that. Or you go in, you purchase a firearm. That's level 1 of danger for a person who is not supposed to have one. But every time you purchase it, the person who did the bill of sale enters a log on that. Somehow, some way. Because we must either track the people who carry firearms, which is actually easier than tracking the people, the firearms themselves. And now, dealing with illegal use of guns and illegal guns, we know there's going to be a penalty for having illegal weapons. Not people who have permits for illegal weapons, because illegal weapons, you should be able to have a permit for an illegal weapon depending on what you're going to do with it. But the people who caught with illegal weapons who don't have no permit. So that now law enforcement can track down the illegal weapons much more easily. But if you don't have a way to either track the gun owners or track the weapons, you can't clamp down on illegal weapons. You just can't. So these are all things that it's just common sense stuff. And if Capitol Hill will stop playing games with the public and sit down, grow some balls, and make a law, the NRA doesn't have to agree with it. They will be beneficiaries in the end anyway. But make a sensible law. Don't make no dumb, stupid law. Make a sensible law on gun control federally that blankets all states, and then the states can build from there, or they can say, no, I don't want that federal law. I'm going to just make a law contingent to that. But the states pay a penalty if the laws that they put in place do not work along with federal law, and yet they are not as effective as federal law. You see what I'm saying? The states would have enforce the federal laws, because states can agree with federal law or not. Federal law is just a blanket law put in place for states to build on or reject. So at the end of the day, the federal law will allow the states the flexibility, but it's a sort of a template, a blanket, so that the states who don't know what to do and are not handling their situation properly can resort to the blanket and then build on that. All right, people. It was good talking with you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you can circulate this video to as many people as possible. I think the discussion on gun laws and gun control must continue onwards. It must stay in the public's eye. Of course, gun laws and gun control is so important because the people who take lives, the lives they take, never had a choice in it. Everything else you have a choice with. When it comes to obesity and health and disease, you have a choice. You're in control of those things, and you can make a change. But when it comes to gun laws and the people who are doing these acts of hate, it's very important to understand the victims never had a choice. You guys have a great one.